Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I am filming my January and February reading wrap up. The reason we are combining today is because over those 2 months I read 4 books and there was one main culprit of a book that made that happen. We will talk about that later in this video. I'm so excited to have you here to chat books today. Let me share with you my thoughts and the books that I've read so far this year in 2025. So I started out the year finishing off a series actually. I read The Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This is the 3rd book in the Dreamland Billionaires series. This is a thick book, especially for a romance. I'm not afraid of a thick book. I do enjoy fantasy a lot of the time, but like for a romance, and especially for this series and Lauren Asher's writing, which is typically not my favorite. I was putting this off for a long time. This was actually on my physical TBR for a very long time. But I did also listen. Did I listen to this? Yes, I think I listened to it and read this. This was actually my favorite book of the Dreamland Billionaires series. So in this book, we're following the 3rd brother, Callahan, or better known as Cal, and Alana. And they were childhood best friends, and essentially all the books of Dreamland Billionaires, the grandfather has something in his will that the grandsons have to do to get their inheritance, and it's usually always something that the grandfather knew that the grandson had to work through. So Cal in this book struggles with addiction with alcohol, and I actually really enjoyed Cal as a character. He was very well rounded. You saw him go back and forth and struggle, and it just felt very real. I personally really enjoy when romances include a really heavy topic, because if it's just kind of like fluffy love and romance, and if the writing isn't like super great, it feels honestly very pointless to read. So I liked how this topic was included because I feel like it's very real and a lot of people could relate to it. I did like Alana. Alana has a daughter named Cami, and typically, again, kids in books can be written very cringy. This kid in the book, Cami, is supposed to be 5, and I have like a background in childhood education and psychology and stuff, as many of you might know if you've been around on the channel for a while, and it's just like not how a 5-year-old acts. I feel like it's really obvious when an author writes a kid in a book and they haven't done research on like what that age group acts like, because this child acts much more like a 3 or a 4-year-old. So that was like cringy at times. And if you've heard me talk about Lauren Asher books before, at least like the Dreamland Billionaire series, there is so much tell and not show. And to me, tell and not show is Alana felt sad versus like a tear dripped down Alana's cheek. Like, I am sad is like telling us what's happening in the book. And I feel like beautiful writing really should be like showing us the feelings and things going on. These can be super cringy to me, but this was the least cringy out of all of them. And I think Cal and like the alcoholism piece of it all really helped this book feel very well-rounded. I ended up giving this a 3.75 stars. Next up, I read Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth. This is my first Sally Hepworth book. Let me preface this by saying that I am not someone that likes super intricate, dark thrillers. I also am very gullible, and I'm really bad at like guessing endings or plot twists. So take that with what you will when I talk about these books, because I can imagine for someone that like loves thrillers and is like really good at guessing the plot twists, that these next 2 books I'm about to talk about would be like super easy for you to guess. But like, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh, what? When the plot twists happened. So I really enjoyed Darling Girls. And then I also read The Maidens, which are both kind of like my level of thriller. So specifically, Darling Girls felt like a very domestic, slow psychological thriller. It's very character-based. It is not a thriller in what is going on necessarily, but it's like the way in which it is written. So essentially it follows these 3 adoptive sisters that lived in this foster home called Wild Meadows with Miss Fairchild, who was their like adoptive mother. And Miss Fairchild, you can tell from the beginning, is a very unreliable character. You don't really know what's going on with her. She seems really loving and like beautiful and like this welcoming, amazing foster home experience. Stuff that especially a child could easily not prove is like child abuse, but a lot of like really interesting stuff happens. Like, to give you a little look into like the types of things that go on, Miss Fairchild is trying to teach Jessica, which is like the oldest sister, her first adoptive child that we know of, how to swim. And she's like letting Jessica like kind of not drown, but like almost drowned. And you can tell it's not being done in like a good way. Like, you know how like when you're teaching a child to swim, like they might struggle a little bit, but that's like part of the learning. Like, you can tell that Miss Fairchild is like trying to inflict trauma on her. And so that's why I would say this is a very like psychological specific thriller. But it is super fascinating. The story follows all three sisters' POVs, and what's super cool is that each sister is super different. We have Jessica, who struggles with kind of addiction, and she has OCD, and she's a professional like house organizer. Then you have Nora, who struggles with kind of like violent outbursts and also some substance things, and she's like really wild and speaks her mind and kind of like wild child, if you will. And then you have Alicia, who is a lawyer for foster care kids and kind of is like channeled her trauma into like good, but she has her own like struggles. And so they're all super different, but yet they have had such a similar upbringing in their interesting foster home. The past and present flows really nicely. It's not a then and now POV. The present and the past like flows in each character's like stream of consciousness, which I love that style of past and present. It was a very, very good book. I gave this a 4-star. So the last book I read in January was The Maidens. I must have been like on a thriller mystery kick, because this is actually pretty rare for me to read like 2 of them back to back, but this also was incredible. I also gave this a 4-star. This is following Mariana, and she is a group therapist, and she has lost her husband, who she met at Cambridge. She also went to Cambridge. Now she has a niece named Zoe that goes to Cambridge, and essentially a murder happens, and Mariana is convinced she knows who did it. And so the whole story is like Mariana going back to Cambridge and trying to prove that she thinks that this person did it. The author sets up like a few people that the murderer could be, and the plot twist was just like, I actually didn't see it coming at all. I was like, oh my gosh. This book was very beautifully written. I feel like I hadn't read writing this beautiful in a while. This book also really captured what it feels like to mourn a loss, because as Mariana is going through this story, you're realizing how much like sadness and trauma she has from her husband passing away, and it comes up in different ways throughout the story. I would say this was pretty fast paced. It has really, really short chapters, which I loved. Definitely a little bit like more fast paced than Darling Girls. Again, Darling Girls was like slower, slightly more character driven. This was pretty plot driven. There was like kind of a lot going on, and again, a lot of different people that like were involved, and so it was very engaging throughout the story. I will say that this got slightly dark because she is a group therapist. There is this one character who is like kind of alluding to self-harm and even suicide, and typically those things are a little heavy for me. So if those things aren't the best for you, I would skip this, but I'm a pretty sensitive person and I was still able to handle it. It wasn't super present in the story, but there was just little bits and pieces. This was definitely not for me like a read right before bed book, because it definitely didn't calm me down. I was like getting wired as I read it, which honestly I would say is like a good mark of a thriller. So I really, really enjoyed this book. The last book we have to talk about in this video was the only book I read in February. To be gentle with myself, we know that February is a very short month. However, this book took me a long time to read. I actually didn't even just read this in September. I started this book in January, and I didn't even finish it till March, but I'm including it in this video because it took me all of February to read it. That is none other than Onyx Storm. If you recall from my 2024 wrap up, I was sharing how I wanted to become a harsher, more like critical rater. This book is allowing me to do that. I gave this book a 1.75 star. I actually don't think I've given a book that low of a rating that I have actually finished. I typically will reserve like 1 and 2 for DNFs, and I'm like, a DNF should be like a 0. Like, we can't even rate it. Like, this is a It's so crazy because I know there is such a love for this series. So if this is a book that you love, like please take what I say with a grain of salt, as we all should for reading reviews, because literally it's all just our opinion. This felt so messy. I will say that I didn't try super hard to like know what was going on, and I did take a slight break in between Iron Flame. Actually, no, that's a lie. I read Iron Flame actually pretty soon, like before this released, because I was getting ready for this, and I was so confused, like most of the time. I also would say, like in general, throughout all three books in Fourth Wing, the main things that are going on, which is like the Dark Wielders, you know, basically the enemy of the book, and the first rebellion that happens, those two things, I realized like they're very critical to the storyline and the plot and the decisions that characters are making. And I was like, wait, I actually don't know what's going on in these two areas. Like, I feel like we got the history of the rebellion and we kind of got told what the Dark Wielders are doing. It honestly was done so poorly that I was super confused on like main plot points. And I don't think that was like a me thing. Like, I think that was a book thing. I do have notes on all the books I read. I'm gonna use these right now to just like rapid fire all the things that I really don't like about this book. Why was there not a map of the Isles? Like that was like a really big part of the book, them going to the Isles, and why is there not a map of that? Like, I'm a visual learner, and when it comes to fantasies, like I need to visualize like where they are. There's so many city names, and I like why is that not on the map? I'm like, as I'm reading my notes, I'm like getting mad all over again. The kings and the queens of all the I don't even know what they're called, territories, isles, kingdoms, whatever, were so confusing. Like that, I would say like the royalty of the world was explained and written so poorly. And I truly feel like some of the kings and the queens that were mentioned like once or twice. And I really dislike when fantasy books do that, because it's like, why even tell me their name? Like, I'm already confused because this is a bad book to me, and like, why would you just like throw in someone else's name? The one thing that confuses me, and I'm gonna say it in a cryptic way so that it is not spoilers, none of these things are spoilers. The thing that happens at the end of Iron Flame, I don't really understand how it happened. Like, I feel like that was written so confusing, and that's obviously like a main part of this book, and so I just like really didn't enjoy that, because again, I was just confused. The things that I did like about this book, reason for the 1.75 stars. I really do enjoy the bonded conversations that Violet has with her dragons and Xaden. I really do like their dynamic and their banter. I was decently invested in Xaden and Violet, but like nowhere near the way I've been invested in other characters and relationships. And then I did like the college setting. However, I feel like we got the least amount of the college setting in this book, and I get it. It's because of like what's going on in the story, but that was my favorite part of the other two books, and so we actually got less of that in there. But when we did get it, I really did enjoy it. I picked back up recently Throne of Glass, and it's just like, I don't mean to like fully compare, but when I had to read this level of writing and level of fantasy compared to a Sarah J. Maas book, I was like, oh, like this is what good fantasy sounds like. Like, and I know that does sound so harsh, but like, to me, this like does not compare at all. Literally everyone has their own thoughts and their own opinions and what they like and what they dislike. And that's the beauty of the fact that there are literally thousands of books for everyone to choose from. But to me, the writing in Onyx Storm was just like not it. And I think there's going to be 2 more books. I think I've heard that, and I will likely not be picking up those 2 books. Those are the 4 books that I've read so far this year. Again, Onyx Storm got me in a bit of a book slump. It was interesting because I wanted to read a lot. Like, I was thinking about the book here and there as I was reading it and wanting to read, and then I would never pick up the book. And that to me was telling me that I am not in a reading slump. I was in a book slump. And so I'm really happy with the books that I've read so far in March. I'm very excited to talk to you about them because we have found our first 5-star of the year. If you want a sneak peek into what that is, you can definitely check out my Goodreads. It's definitely not a secret, but I will slightly hold on to the secret here in video format until my March reading wrap up. Thanks again for being here with me. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you in a future video. Bye.